You're on the air with Florenza, your podcast destination for authentic conversations with a twist. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join me on this unique literary journey. Cheers! Jon McGoran delivers a post-pounding, mind-bending thriller with the Prince of Everything. In a future where the internet has collapsed, power is currency, literally. When elite courier Armond Pierce discovers his delivery has vanished mid-transit, he is thrust into a world of corporate corruption, disappearing money, and mind control. What begins as a job gone wrong becomes a race against time to save civilization itself. Gritty, gripping, and eerily prophetic, this techno thriller asks, what is the price of everything? Put your hands together to welcome Jon to the show. Thank you so much, Jon, for joining me on this episode of On the Air with Florenza. Well, we are going to chat about your newest release, The Price of Everything, which is a very, very timely book. But before we dive into any of that, we're going to cheer, not that we haven't already been sipping, because ladies and gents, we had a pre-show take place already. So you guys are late to the party.
Pre-gaming.
So we're toasting. Ooh, is that a little scotch or whiskey or what do
It
we
is
have?
a little whiskey. Yes, it is.
Okay, what brand are we drinking? Because I'm a whiskey girl
Jameson's.
too. Oh, you can't
Yeah.
go wrong with Jameson.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong. Well, cheers, my friend.
Cheers. So happy to be here.
And I'm happy to have you. Price of Everything has actually been likened to classics such as Blade Runner. Which cyberpunk works, other than the one that we've already mentioned, have most influenced your writing, or did you just stumble into this genre organically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, definitely, I've been influenced by Neil Stephenson and by William Gibson and Philip Dick, which I would argue, some of his stuff kind of verges on the cyberpunk. I think this is cyberpunk adjacent. But one of the conceits of The Price of Everything is that we're in the wake of a cyber war. And part of the fallout of the cyber war is that there is no more internet. It's just not secure. There's no internet. There's no e-commerce. There is no cyber.
Mm.
So that changes a lot of things, and that's kind of, it's almost like it's like an anti-cyberpunk, because the cyber has been, part of the conceit, part of the premise is that the cyber part has been removed, and we're looking at how kind of society adapts and works around that.
Walk us through the process of you getting this idea and everything coming to you at once. Was there just a moment when you were listening to the news and that aha kicked in, or has this been something that you've been toying with and you're like, now's the time to release this story?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. A lot of the times, I have one of these kind of, I don't know if I don't think it's ADD, but my brain is just like constantly churning, and I'm constantly getting ideas. And my wife, God bless her, is like, oh yeah, that's really interesting. It's because I always share them with her. Um, and sometimes like a full premise pops into my head. With my last, my previous books, the Spliced trilogy. I, the idea popped into my head fully formed that,
Uh-huh.
and the conceit for those books, they were a YA trilogy, near future. Genetic engineering has matured to the point that it's available on the street as a form of body modification, and this kind of subculture of disaffected young people splice themselves with animal genes to alter themselves in different ways for different reasons. Some just for fashion, some as a protest statement, some to, align themselves with the increasingly dwindling natural world. And that, and then there's a backlash against them, and a law is passed that anyone whose DNA is not 100% human is no longer legally a person. And it just like that whole premise just popped into my head. with a title and which I ended up not using. But it was just like I was walking down the street and it was like a bolt from the blue. Most of my books start out with like an idea.
Yeah.
And this book was a little different because there are several ideas that I'd been toying with for a long time. One of them was the idea of like cash, of money as a vulnerability, as something that could be attacked. And I'd had ideas for like a terrorist attack where they were putting some pathogen on cash to make people afraid of cash and kind of sabotage our cash obsessed society. And I thought that was interesting, but and the climate, the climate change, I'm always kind of thinking about that because I think it's an existential threat. The idea of corporate billionaire oligarchs kind of taking over the economy or taking over society and kind of edging the government out, edging the public sector out, and just kind of trying to take over everything. Geoengineering is a part of the story,
Yeah.
and that's an idea that I've been thinking about a lot, how that could, the stories about that. So I had all these ideas, and I actually started writing this book in 2015.
Oh.
So I usually write pretty quickly, and I've written three or four, maybe five other books since I started writing this. I think it probably is five now that I think of it.
Uh-huh.
So this is one that's been kind of,
Simmering.
fermenting and simmering. Exactly.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it for a long time. And part of it is that, I call it my most celebrated work because of how many times I've declared to my wife, well, it's finished. And we celebrate with a toast, and then my agent's like, yeah, no, it's not. And I
Not
get,
quite.
the revisions back and I have to go back and so it's been revised probably four or five times. And there were times when I thought about abandoning it because, sometimes it's always easier to work on something new
New.
than
Yeah.
to revise something old. But I'm really glad that I didn't because it is my favorite book by far so far. And I think I'm really, really excited to have it out in the world.
What has been the reception of the book in terms of fear for the possibility or comments of this is brilliant, John. What in your head? And like, how did you do this? What has been that response?
There has been some response like that, which has been gratifying. I've got some really nice reviews from a couple of some blogs and some authors who I really admire. Ed Ashton, who wrote Mickey 17, and Rob Hart, who wrote the Assassins Anonymous, and I think
Uh-huh.
the Medusa Protocol is coming out. That's his sequel, and he's great. I really I'm a big fan of both of them. Rob, he does a really great job. He had this book, The Warehouse, which was kind of like an extrapolation of the Amazon phenomenon, and he has some really interesting takes on our society that extrapolate things a little further out. But yeah, one of the things that because of the stuff that I write, one of the things that I really, really appreciate and am gratified by are reviews that say, frighteningly realistic, or,
Yeah.
a tomorrow, that kind of thing. And I think all of those reviews have said something to that effect. Booklist and Publishers Weekly and Library Journal have all kind of mentioned how realistic it is and how easy it is to picture things going in this direction, which, and it's a fear, because when you're writing these things that are, taking something current and
Yeah.
extrapolating it into the near future, events can easily overpass you while you're writing it, or
Yep.
more frighteningly, while the book is waiting to come out, while it's in production. And unfortunately, the world has leaned into
Yeah.
the future that I
Yeah.
imagine, but it has not surpassed it. And the same thing happened with the spliced books. There was a lot of there were aspects of those books, and none of the crucial aspects, but some of the premises of those
Yes.
books did become reality. They were things that when I was researching them in the research phase, all the experts I talked to said, yeah, no, that's not happening, and some said that'll never happen. And by the time the book came out, they
It
had
was
indeed
happening.
happened. They were actual reality. So it's kind of unsettling. But it's really gratifying as well to to kind of know that you nailed it in either in reality or in critics' eyes.
Yeah, I interviewed Brian Freeman. Actually, I've interviewed him twice, and we had the same conversation in terms of what happens when reality kind of coincides with this fictional world that you created. And during the process of creating it, you're like, oh, yeah, this will never happen. I feel comfortable putting this to paper
Yeah,
because somewhere in the back of your mind, you're thinking, this is so bizarre
yeah.
that I feel comfortable knowing that it's going to stay living in this fictional space. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden, it's like pucker effect. Did I do this? Right? Do you feel like
Yeah.
that Stephen Urkel moment? Did I do this?
Yeah, well, there have been, a number of times people have been like, "Oh, did they get this idea from your book?" And it's like, well, I don't think so, but maybe, who knows?
Who
Um,
knows? Your wife, having been involved with this particular story, I know that she's involved with all the others, but having been involved with this one and seeing the iterations that have taken place over the past 10 years, right? Since 2015, did she give you the high five and go, well done, my dude? Or did she say, man, you just should have knocked this out 11 years ago? What took you so long?
well, she's great. She is also just like she's really supportive, and she's a really smart beta reader. I value her opinion immensely. And she had read several, I mean, there were like four or five different, substantial revisions.
Uh-huh.
And she had read a couple of the early ones. And by the time I got to this latest version, she said, you know what? I think I want to wait until it comes out in a book,
Okay.
until it's actually out. Um, so she actually she just started reading it last night. Also, we sold the book like over 2.5 years ago. And it didn't come out until now because things were so backed up
Yeah.
from the pandemic and then
Yeah.
all the supply chain stuff that followed. So it had been a long time since I had looked at it. So last night I had said I wanted to, I had planned on reading it again, and
Uh-huh.
I never read my own stuff. It's like
Yeah.
you go
Yeah.
through it so much, but I thought about going back and reading some of my older stuff, and then I thought about this, and she's like, well, you had said and I ran out of time to read
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
before it came out. But yeah, so last night we both started reading it, and it's holding up. It's parts of it are the same. I've been over them so many times, and parts of the beginning I had read at the launch and at other places. But yeah, it was really fun to kind of dive back in. So that's what I'm reading right now, which is a first for me. I've never kind of done that, especially not so soon after release.
How satisfied were you with the timing of the release? Do you feel that everything was perfect the way that it should, and this is the absolute best time for it to have been released?
That's a really good question. That's a really interesting question, and I think I do. When it came out, or when we sold it, and I got the pub date, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to wait so long.
Uh-huh.
I was disappointed, but because of the themes of the book and because of the unfortunate turns that our world has taken in the
Yes.
last few years, I guess. I do think that it is very, very timely. I think it's particularly timely. And I think depending on how you look at it, I think there's an optimistic ending. And I mean, some people might disagree with that.
Uh-huh.
But I think that it kind of, again, it kind of threads a needle of addressing some really serious concerns for today, but also offering a little bit of hope.
Yeah. That was going to be my question. Do you feel that there's like hope threaded in there because it is such a heavy subject, and that
Mhm.
you answered that question? Where do you see this story going? Has everything that you felt needed to be addressed with the price of everything been addressed, or do you feel that there's going to be a follow-up story attached to it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I could definitely see, and I absolutely originally thought of it as a standalone, as
Hmm.
a one book, as a standalone. Um, I have thought that of other books. I mean, I kind of thought that with Spliced, which by the
Uh-huh.
time I was finished writing it, I was like dying to write more books in the series because I had so many ideas about where it could go from there. With this, I have had a few ideas, and of ideas that are kind of sequels that take place in the same universe. But one of the things, as I said before, I have a lot of ideas, and one of the biggest challenges for me as a writer is deciding what I'm going to write. I'm having ideas all the time, and a lot of them are stupid.
Yeah.
By all means, I freely acknowledge that. But a lot of them I find really compelling. And anytime you decide to write something, especially a novel, you are deciding not to write 100 other things.
Right.
There's all
Yeah.
these other ideas that you have. So it's always a balance of, do I want to explore this idea further? Yes. But do I want to explore this idea further rather than tackle this other
Uh-huh.
new idea? So I have a book that is, largely written. It needs to be revised, and I haven't had time to do that because I've had other obligations.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I also have another book that came to me, an idea, and this one was, another one of these ideas that came to me very like fully formed.
Uh-huh.
In the middle of the night, I woke up, I was like drifting off to sleep. And I was like, oh my God, that's a great idea. And I started writing it, and it just all came out. And I was
Uh-huh.
up for a couple of hours just writing, on my phone in bed. And I'm really, really excited about it. And it kind of, it definitely wouldn't be a sequel to this, I don't think.
Uh-huh.
But it could be considered so. This would be, it would take place after, further into the future, maybe 80 or 90 years, where the climate has already collapsed and the world is recovering from it and has learned its lessons, or most of us have. It's an idea that I think about every day. So I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I'm dying to write that book, but I'm also
Ooh.
dying to finish this other book. And I would also consider writing a sequel to this,
Uh,
or a trilogy, because I like trilogies.
yeah.
But I also have like a TV series that I've been working on that my film agents have given me notes on, and they're waiting for me to work on that. So there's like a lot of other stuff, and it's hard, and so again, it's like it goes back to anything that you decide to write
Yep.
is, you're responding
Sacrificing.
sorry, sending
Yep.
your regrets to the other ideas, at least for now. And there's only so much time in life, so yeah, it's an important and difficult
Decision.
calculation.
Mhm. Do your ideas sit patiently in a waiting room in your mind, or do they get jealous over the ideas that have made it to the forefront? Are they like disgruntled lovers, or do they just kind of patiently wait their turn to get
Yeah,
called
there's
into
a
the
there
master's room?
there's a lot of jostling, there's a lot of clamoring for attention. um and it's terrible, but, I have kind of the stuff that, I have my fiction, and then I have other stuff that I do, whether it's ghostwriting or developmental editing, or helping people write nonfiction proposals, or some freelance writing. All these things are in the mix. And I always feel guilty, like, even no matter what I'm doing, because there's all these other things that I'm not doing.
Uh-huh.
And if I'm working on, a ghostwriting project, I feel guilty because I'm not working on my stuff. If I'm working on my stuff, it's like, oh, I should be doing this other thing. And the same is true with, if I'm working on a fiction project, one of my own fiction projects, in addition to, oh, I should be doing this other stuff, there's like, I should be working on these other fiction projects. So I don't know if it's my Catholic school, upbringing, or what, but yeah, I'm always kind of, no matter what I'm working on, I'm feeling the tap on the shoulder from everything else that is
Uh-huh.
vying for my attention.
Let me ask you this. What has been the most either embarrassing or unusual place that an idea or character has popped up and demanded your attention?
That's an interesting question. That's
Oh,
an
your
interesting
face
question.
is telling so much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gosh. Well, because there's one. So the most awkward iteration of this that I can remember, and I was just talking to my brother about it. So years ago, in our arguably misspent youth, my brother and I had a band for about 12 years, and we wrote all the songs, and
See,
we
you've
took it
got
very
the gray
seriously.
hair. You've got great band hair.
I'll tell you, there was a time. So I've got these like ridiculous cowlicks that I don't know
Uh,
if you can see, but they're always like,
uh-huh,
at the awkward moments. It's like all of my school pictures when I was a kid. It was like, you know. But so I had for a long time I had a ponytail down to my belt
uh-huh.
when I was young. Just like, okay, I'm just gonna stop and tie it back and get out of my face. But we were talking about our old songs and how sometimes like an entire song, verse, chorus, bridge, the vocal line, everything, a lyric would pop into your head. And I had this song called Look Inside, and I remember vividly I was taking a leak
And it
and
came.
it came, and it was just, I mean, it was like really, it was, it's almost, I'm not a religious person,
Uh-huh,
but it was like a religious experience, this kind
uh-huh.
of bolt from the blue, the entire song. It was really, it astonished me. I mean, it really, so I got more ideas than I know what to do with,
Yeah,
Bucko. Um, but people think that the idea is the thing, and it's not, but it is.
yeah, yeah,
I really, I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of ideas while I'm falling asleep.
yeah,
And I really, really do try to every time I try to respect them.
yeah.
I try to kind of give them the due deference and, wake myself up out of the, whatever level of sleep I'm
Uh-huh.
approaching, and write it down.
Yeah,
And some of those ideas that I like, the idea I was just telling you about, that this book I want to write, it was like that. And I could have just gone to sleep. I really wanted to
yeah,
just go to sleep,
yeah,
but no, I woke up and stayed up for a couple hours because it was just like this fire hose
yeah,
of inspiration, which was, it's just like the most joyful thing. It's just
yeah.
a phenomenal thing to experience. I really am, feel privileged that I'm allowed to kind of not just experience it and kind of make it part of my professional life.
Yeah. Man, this is such good stuff. I just feel like we are having this awesome opportunity to delve into all things John, but I would be remiss if we didn't spend some of our time discussing the price of everything. So give us some backstory of the price of everything, the synopsis, and really, I'd like to know more about Armand.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. So, we talked a little bit about it, but basically it's in a near future ravaged by climate change where, corruption is, the billionaires have taken over, and there's this organization, Unicon, United Conglomerates, which in the wake of a cyber war, which kind of wiped out the internet and brought us back to a cash basis, they have kind of taken over and they kind of usurped most governmental power. So, as I said, there's been this return to a cash basis, and in order to facilitate that, the U.S. government has started printing these super high denomination bills. $10,000 bills, $500,000 bills, so that these billionaires can ship the money back and forth. And in order to protect it, this guild of couriers has arisen, and they are these kind of elite. Most of them are former soldiers, and part of the premise is that they have a titanium cuff grafted onto their bones in their wrist. And they have an attaché case changed to that. And that's what they carry their payload in. And basically, they swear an oath to the guild that they will deliver this shipment, whatever it is. And if they don't, then the aggrieved party, the recipient, can cut off their hand and let them bleed out.
Oh,
And so it's like this really kind of serious thing. And in the story, this courier, Armond Pierce, he goes by Pierce. He's making this delivery, and he gets there, and his attaché case is empty. And he is faced with this decision. He has taken this oath, but all along he's known that it was kind of bullshit.
yeah.
So he fights back and escapes and goes on this, journey to try to figure out what's going on. And as he does, he wants to find the explanation to defend himself.
Uh-huh.
But as he does, he gets deeper and deeper and deeper into this global conspiracy that threatens to just upend the global order. So there's a lot of ideas in there. There's wealth disparity and climate change, and the fragility of our economic system,
Yeah.
both the cash and the cyber. There's this, I really enjoyed writing. There's this one exchange between this older guy who was from our time and has
Uh-huh.
and was younger during our time and has grown older, and this young man who's just like, he's kind of laughing at him for ever having trusted the internet, like when there was like so much cyber fraud going on and all this phishing stuff and identity theft. And it really is. I mean, from where I sit, it's very easy to imagine the whole thing collapsing,
Absolutely.
because yeah, yeah. And then it's an interesting thought experiment. Where would we be if it does?
Yeah.
But one of the really interesting things about Armond, I think, about Pierce, is looking at what drove him to allow these people to like disfigure him, to maim his body,
Yeah.
and swear this oath to put his life, in front of some billionaire's money. And I think it says a lot about kind of where we are today and where
Yeah.
we're headed, when there's such an imbalance of power
Yeah.
between the ultra haves and the ultra have nots. But there's another character as well, Gloriana, who is, the female lead, a former love interest, but she's like this brilliant scientist who is a victim of environmental disasters and climate change. Her rural village in Southeast Asia, basically was devastated by oil spills and by rising sea level. And she becomes a molecular biologist in order to kind of combat this. So she realizes when her village is devastated, that there are these microbes that digest the oil, that break up the oil spills, and she that's what she works on. And she ends up working for oil companies in order to do that. So she's kind of in bed with the enemy.
Yeah.
But then she realizes some terrible truths about them, and takes some drastic action. And I think she's a really interesting character as well. So the story is it alternates between those two points of view. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I love these two characters. I think they're I'm very excited about other people meeting them for sure.
Now, knowing that you work in the movie industry as well, do you have people in mind that you would love to play those two characters were it to be optioned for a movie?
Well, I wouldn't. So first, I wouldn't say I work, and I've written some screenplays. None of them have been sold or produced. I do have,
Oh, that's coming. That's
agents,
coming.
but yeah. And I can't really talk about it
Okay,
because
gotcha.
there are some things in the works.
Okay.
But yeah, I do have some definite ideas. So fingers crossed. We'll see.
Fingers, eyes,
Yeah,
nose, all of
yeah,
it.
exactly, exactly.
Yes. We've come to the part of my show that I have rebranded so many times, but now it is officially last call. It is
Mhm.
simply a few rapid fire questions that I have set up for you. Not much thought. Please don't put too much thought
That's
into
my
it. Just
specialty.
tell us what comes to mind first. Um, what's one book you've read more than once and you still love?
Let's see. I will say there are several, but The Forever War by Joe Haldeman is a remarkable book. He wrote it in the 70s. And the premise is that there's this interstellar war. Earth gets drawn into this war. And because of relativity, every time the soldiers go to like fight some battle out in space and come back, 100 years has passed. And it was this amazing allegory for the Vietnam War and how the world was changing so much as these veterans were coming back. And it was a really formative book for me. I loved it. It was like snarky and funny and really smart, and had a really interesting premise. And I read it a few times as a kid, and I reread it. I had a podcast that I hosted for a while, the Liars Club Oddcast, and we had author interviews. And I was able to interview or co-interview Joe Haldeman, which was just as a
I'll bet
kid, if
that
I
was,
had known that
yes.
that was ever going to happen, would have just blown my mind completely. But yeah, I think that, and it was great because I reread it recently. Totally holds up, which is remarkable for a book, whatever, 40 years old or something. Yeah, close to 50. Yeah, so now I would say that one. Yep.
Nice. If you could live in any fictional universe, which would it be?
Huh. Interesting. Well, I'll tell you. So, another book that I read in the last couple of years that I really, really loved was by an author named Elon Matsai, Matsai, and it's his only book. He's primarily a TV writer, but he's this great book called All Our Wrong Todays.
Oh,
And it's very funny and very readable, and it has this phenomenal premise that this that time travel is invented. This guy's father invented it, and the world is like this idyllic utopia. It's like the Jetsons. There's flying cars and everything, and there's limitless energy, and the environment is fine and everything. But I forget the finer points of the premise. But there was some tragedy that happened when his father made this invention, and this guy, the main character, decides to go back in time and fix that one thing. And he goes back in time and he fixes that one thing, changing the future and devastating it, making it this terrible, flawed, dystopian future, which is what we're living in. It's like today with climate
he
change and
created our
terrorism and
today
wars and
because he
everything.
fixed it.
Exactly, exactly. So and it's just a great book. It really is. I keep checking to see if he's got something else coming out. I guess he's probably being successful writing TV. But I hope he writes something else because it was a great, great book. And yeah, I loved it. I loved it. So that idyllic, perfect future that he ruined, I think I would like to live there.
That's where you want to live. What's the very last thing that you Googled other than me? No.
That's I've probably got is probably researching something. Let's see. Um, let's see. Oh, actually, well, the last thing I Googled was how much of a song's lyrics can you incorporate into your work before you have to get permission? Because I thought you could some, but apparently you can't. You can't use
No,
any of them. Yeah,
can't use
yeah. Because
any.
sometimes like on TV you can use like a little bit of music, but if you
Yeah.
go more than whatever 15 seconds or 10 seconds, so I thought you'd be able to get. So yeah, I had to paraphrase.
Yeah.
Oh well.
If you weren't a writer, what would you be doing?
That is a really interesting question. I don't know. I've been doing this for a while now. Before I kind of started writing and editing and kind of being a self-employed, uh, amalgam of things. I was a magazine editor, and before that, I was communications director for a nonprofit. If it was like totally not writing related, I
Uh-huh.
don't know. I'm kind of useless.
Nice. Last one. If all of your characters that you have created for all of your books were to show up in your backyard for a cookout, who would cause the most drama and who would sit there and eat their potato salad and hot dog like nothing was taking place?
That is hilarious. That is hilarious. Let's see. Well, I think Pierce would probably be the one sitting there, not causing a problem, just because he's been through so much, and being unflappable is kind of part of his job as a courier, what has been his job as a courier. Who would cause the most trouble? So my previous, oh, I know who it is. Um, Before the Splice trilogy, I wrote a trilogy of adult science thrillers, Drift, Dust Up, and Dead Out. And the protagonist of that was a Philadelphia cop named Doyle Carrick, who he was very kind of snarky and roguish, and probably likely to maybe cause a little trouble.
Uh-huh.
He was yeah, he was kind of, it was very voicey book. It's kind of funny, I think. People sometimes asked if he was based on me, to which I
Uh-huh.
would answer, well, between I've got all of the smart ass, but none of the badass.
That's it.
So yeah, I would think it would probably be Doyle Carrick would be the one causing the trouble, and Armond Pierce would be kind of like, settle down.
Settle down. It's not all that.
That's right.
Where are the listeners able to engage with you, interact with you, and learn all things John?
Yeah, my website is just johnmcgoran.com, JONMCGORAN, no H. And yeah, on social media, I'm at Jon McGoran, JONMCGORAN. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky and Threads and LinkedIn. And there's contact information on the website. People can email me, john@johnmcgoran.com. And yeah, I'm always happy to engage with listeners, readers, anybody, really. I'm easy that way.
Nice. Well, listen, to everyone listening, I encourage you to please reach out to John just to have fun like I had today.
Thanks so much, Florenza. This has been a blast.
This has been wonderful. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
And this wraps up another episode of On the Air with Florenza. You may follow me on all social media platforms under Florenza Lee or via my website at florenza.org. Until next time, cheers.